Hello, everybody. I just got out of the shower, so that's why I have a change in physical appearance. Normally, you would see my hair kind of being worn out along the sides. Not today, it's going to be a little different. Uh, I have been wanting to make this series of videos ever since George asked about um, if Gynarchy could come from democracy. And so now I'm going to answer that question. This is going to concern other Gynarchists too who have already responded. I'm going to start talking about certain subjects they brought up only in relation to this video. So this is going to be first of several parts in a series because it's going to take me a long time to get through. So I don't know if I'll get it all done today or if this will take tomorrow because I've got to go to the store to get like kale and collard greens and stuff. So where can a Gynarchy come from? Right? There's been some disagreement, and I love it. I love the back and forth. That's one of my favorite things. Some people believe that if they can abolish the electoral, like one of the individuals who responds on the videos, which you can see it if you go back to my other videos, said it's possible. It's possible to use the institution, as long as it's functioning, of course, to get women to run things, and that could eventually lead to a society. And I, of course, sided with George at the time and said no. But I like hearing all these different perspectives because I think that is actually what makes a community stronger, not weaker. The embrace of the different perspectives, of the different ideas. But where really, it just fell. I don't have anything to hold it right now. So where can it come from? The first thing is it's actually a non-religious society is where it comes from, but this is a bit complicated. So when I mean non-religious society, I mean a society where you don't have an Abrahamic religion. And the reason for that is because in these androcentric religions, they revolve around male desires and needs and stuff. The male is at the center of everything. They have the power and the control in the family, the society. And Gynarchy can't come from a society which has those things as beliefs. If you have a belief system that is androcentric, it is essentially incompatible with not only a Gynarchic society, but egalitarian society. These people won't even accept egalitarianism because it runs counter to their notions that men should be in charge of things. So if they can't even get on board with that, there's no way they'd ever be on board with women running things. And so in that sense, in order for a Gynarchy to exist, you can't have a society that's controlled by one of these religions. In fact, I would wager that the longer you go without these particular religious beliefs, the more open-minded the population becomes towards gynocentrism, towards gynocentric beliefs. And this isn't just me pulling this out of my ass. I do have a point. This is, I think, Viola Voltairine mentioned something about femdom being a gateway to Gynarchy, which I agree. So in a strict society that is very patriarchal, they're not going to allow any media or medium that depicts women dominating or controlling men. But in a society where women are allowed to express themselves, are allowed to explore the different parts of who they are, when they're allowed to express themselves authentically, in other words, not based on the fear of what the men could do to them, the smaller that religious group's influences in that country, the greater chance you have of a transition taking place. And here's what I mean by that. If you look at Japan, for instance, which is very non-religious, or at least very non-religious compared to the West, they have different values. We see a lot of femdom content in their manga, in the anime industry. In fact, it's loaded. I've done another video about it. You can watch there's a video a while back about Japan and Gynarchy, but essentially you have stuff like even recently you have the Nagatoro anime where a woman literally puts a collar on a guy, she leashes him, and she literally controls him. She prevents him from leaving until Nagatoro comes to to his rescue, so to speak. Um, that is straight out of femdom. You know, her sitting on his back, expressing dominance, that is a form of femdom. And that's not the only one. This has taken place for years. If you look at Zero no Tsukaima, Saito I think he had a collar on for a little while. Luis was actively trying to control him throughout the relation throughout the show. There were times when she was physically disciplining him with like a crop or something. If you go back even further than that, there's an anime called Great Teacher Onizuka, where a girl, I think she coerces a guy into licking her feet. So we have, and these are just like three examples. If you go through, you can find many, many more. But why does that matter? Why does the femdom thing matter? It matters because it starts with a particular context, right? And that's why it's considered a gateway, because it starts with the context of possibly a sexual interaction between a woman and a man, or it could start with just kind of a sexual context, or even just a context that involves the dominance coming from the woman. And then, of course, the natural thought follows. Are there other areas where is the male, when the male thinks about it, and of course when the woman thinks about it, they think, are there other areas where this dominance is not only acceptable but preferable? In other words, other areas of life where women can dominate, like for example the workforce or politics or the community. What about the division of labor? Should the woman be the one focusing on making the money? And who should be doing the lion's share of the chores? And so these kinds of questions of where do you place a limit on control in your personal life and social life and society, where are we going to stop? And if we're going to keep going, how are we going to apply control in these situations? How is the dynamic between men and women going to work in these? And it starts with femdom. Femdom naturally will provoke those kinds of questions in a human being that gives them any kind of thought or serious thought. But it kind of, there's something else too. There's also the fact that, and this is my personal belief, and this goes to goddess worship or goddessian worship. This is something that a commenter who, in the last video, the one who disagreed with me, he brought up a point about goddess worship, and I'm going to bring this up as well because it's very important. I believe that there is a section of the population that cannot stop worshiping. I believe that it is endemic to the human condition that when human beings run out of gods to worship, they don't stop worshiping. They have to worship something or someone. And what I think ends up happening is if you look at femdom itself, like if you go on and you read people's ads, like their femdom ads, or the things that they're advertising, in other words, what they're offering, not only their services, but they're informing other people of their interests. I want to say like 7 times out of 10 or more, there's some form of body worship in there, whether it's foot worship, boot worship, whether it could be muscle worship. Some men like worshiping women's muscles, and there could just be general body worship. But the word is right there. So what we're seeing is that when it comes to femdom in particular, even if there isn't like a goddess that has been established as a religious figure of worship for men, men are already worshiping women, and it's happening through femdom. And so when you take away the religion, whatever it is, whether it's Islamic, Christian, whatever, do these people stop worshiping? And I think that at least in this sense, no, they don't. What they do is they just find someone or something else to worship. And in this case, it's their mistresses, their dominas, their girlfriends, their wives. Those are the individuals that they worship. And it's often the worship is expressed through physical affection, kissing, hugging, certain kinds of expressed submissive body language, like bowing the head or prostration. And so that does matter because the worship in this case is taking place on a more individual basis rather than some kind of figure that supersedes the what we would consider the natural world. Now, am I saying that's inherently a good thing or a bad thing? I'm not. I'm just saying that when you no longer have that pressure to conform to the Abrahamic religion, those values, and people are allowed to worship whatever they want. If they don't, they either go into two camps. There are about three camps. So first, they start finding, like I said, people to worship or things to worship. But there's a second camp where they don't worship anything or anyone at all. Or third, they're kind of confused and lost, and they're not really sure who or what they should turn to because they're not really good at identifying their own personal needs and feelings. And if this now, how could Gynarchy come from this? Obviously, well, first, without the pressure to conform, if people are allowed to express themselves, I believe that naturally you have people that will start turning to worship women and girls. And of course, worship necessarily entails focusing women and girls. In order for a Gynarchy to come about, you first have to have a gynocentric culture. In other words, a culture that centers women and girls and their needs and what will make life easier for them or better for them. Right? But until there is a society that is more accepting of men expressing these values, or at least a society that allows them to express them. In other words, if the society does not criminalize this behavior and they allow men to express gynocentrism in their personal lives, well, then sooner or later, if you have a growing number of men and women who are acting gynocentric, if that becomes a large enough majority in a community or a population, then that gynocentrism will naturally be reflected in the laws of the land. So that is one way it can actually happen. First, you have that influence has to decline from the religious end, and then you have to have a spread of worship. That I often think that femdom and worship of women, sometimes I think that they're just inseparable. I feel like they're one and the same, but I understand that femdom can also be male-centric. Can come from a place of what males want. But at the same time, it doesn't have to be like that. And in some cases, it's definitely not. There are men who center the women and the girls in their lives. So the more you see of the rise of femdom and the decline in the Abrahamic religions, the greater you'll see an increase in gynocentrism. And that's because my personal opinion is you can't just take something and expect it to go away. This is one thing that when I used to be in the non-religious community, I didn't hear as much conversation about, which is, well, what are you supposed to worship instead? And some people would probably say nothing at all. But that's not particularly helpful if your psychology demands that you worship something or someone. If you have like a really deep-seated psychological need for it. And who can fulfill that need? A woman. A woman you respect, a woman you value and revere. So that will cap off part one. I have to do a little bit of work. I have to go and take care of some groceries at the store. But I wanted to kind of leave it off on this because I feel like this is, when I get into too many other things, I worry about that. So just having a focus on this to start with would be great. Thank you so much for your time. I'll be back whenever I can to continue. This is going to be, again, a series of videos. I don't know when it's going to end because I have notes right here. Not necessarily bulletin points, but I had to write some of this stuff out because I feel like there's a lot of different things, different elements, rather, that could spring into being either a Gynarchy or at least a gynocentric community or society. So again, thank you for your time. I hope you all have a great day. Take care.